Looking quite nice in the U.S. this afternoon. A few problem spots in the Great Lakes region and some rain coming into the Pacific Northwest. Why don't we start out with that surface analysis? Very warm across much of the southern U.S. I'm seeing 70s across a huge chunk of the country. Even up north, we're coming up into the 30s and 40s. And this little outbreak of cold air, really not all that cold. We're just looking at teens and 20s. And in the northwestern U.S., there's our new Pacific system, the tail end of a system that came into British Columbia, now starting to organize a bit and producing some rains on the Oregon coast. Let's take a look out in the Pacific, check out the weather in that region. Gulf of Alaska, it's got an occlusion. That's probably going to be heading for the southeastern Alaska coast. Cold air still hanging on in the Alaskan interior, but temperatures do appear to be moderating. Teens and 20s. I'm not really seeing anything below zero until we get into Canada. And there, yeah, we do have a fresh polar air mass that's diving down into the Hudson Bay region and the Canadian prairies. Temperatures in that quite cold, minus 10 to minus 20. I would imagine that most of that cold air is probably heading into the Great Lakes, Quebec, and Ontario. And that's looking at the thickness pattern. These dashed blue lines, those tend to approximate the upper level flow, suggesting the steering currents are like that, and that will tend to take the cold air to the east. And then a quick look out in the Atlantic. Once again, Newfoundland being affected by a strong Maritimes system. It is detached from the warmer air mass and the higher dew points, the higher moisture. So, looks like the precip is not going to be really all that extreme. And of course, stormy up in Greenland. Seems like the southeastern coast, very brutal area for precip, because they get these semi-permanent systems hanging around in this area. They get that onshore flow, lots of orographic lift, and that's definitely a ripe condition for snowfall. And I want to show you something kind of related to that. Put in DYE-4 into a search engine. That's the distant early warning code for a station in southeastern Greenland, not in service anymore. And you'll eventually end up on this L.S. Wilson Dewline Adventures page. And, of course, one of the first things that you hit is a weather panel, because weather is very prominent in that part of Greenland. And you can see that was a major dewline site, lots of radar equipment. And within that page, you'll find a link to the storm of 73. Now, on some of these pages, you're going to hit this critical error on the website. Just try reloading. And there we go. And you'll find a nice story here about what it was like to weather one of those storms. And you can see a little write-up I contributed to the website about 3 years ago. I never worked there, but I do find the weather there pretty extreme and rather fascinating. Of course, another significant area of interest is Ukraine, where we have a war going on. Let's check out the weather in that region. Still got this pesky Black Sea low just south of Odessa. Ukraine located right here. And Moldova over here. Then we have Romania, Hungary, and Poland, and Belarus. And you can see we're getting data for pretty much all of this area. What we have is snow showers. Down in the lower levels, we have cold air advection working in from Russia, keeping temperatures in the low to mid-30s. In the mid-levels, we have moist flow coming from the Black Sea. And that's a potent recipe for isentropic lift. Got that cold dome there at the surface. You get that ascent over the cold air. And as a result, cloudy conditions and lots of light rain, light snow, and a ton of clouds. So until this whole circulation weakens, it should stay overcast and a little bit of light precip during that time. A lot of weather down there in Turkey. This is interesting. Strong low on the south coast there. Some of that cold air filtering down into Turkey. And we've got some of the snow there in the interior regions. Cold air advection across the eastern Mediterranean. Temperatures down near 40 around Athens. Stagnant weather across Central Europe, 30s and low 40s, but warmer temperatures in France. Warm air advection coming up from the Atlantic, from Spain, Portugal, and a new Atlantic system moving into the British Isles. Well, let's return home and take a look at weather around the country. Sunshine continuing across the southwestern U.S., some patchy cirrus, especially up there around Tonopah. And as we've seen time and time again, as you move north into Oregon, things go downhill. Mountain wave activity across much of the region, indicating strong flow aloft. And look out there along the coast. Got that antifront set up, the front hanging on somewhere in this area right here, and back behind it, the ascent, and even a few convective towers west of Crescent City. And Portland and Seattle in the bulk of that. I think I can make out somewhat of a lee side effect right here. Kind of an anomaly of not much cloud material, but certainly a lot of it as you go east towards Spokane. And then more of that cloud rounding the ridge in Montana. Some snow and rain in the higher elevations of Montana. The Dakotas being affected by a backdoor front. I don't know if you can see these plots, but Rapid City, 61 at this hour, even with a light north wind. 60 at this station here in south central South Dakota, but it diminishes to 40s, 30s, and 20s as you go north. The frontal boundary located right about here. The low-level flow, somewhat like that. And then to the north, we've got the stratus and stratocumulus. No organized precip within that at this hour, but some fog was being reported by some of the stations. I'll leave those plots on. If you don't like it, just let me know. But wow, 70s in Nebraska. Wow, even 75 around Omaha. Yeah, that's definitely picnic weather in that part of the country. Further to the west in Denver, a little bit of patchy cirrus north of Denver. That's where Big Rig Steve is. So we're looking south here. I can see Interstate 25 right there. And there's some of that patchy cirrus. A lot of that associated with lift over the Rockies, but that's about where that ridge axis is. So not very much of that is extending to the east. And that's one more look at that. You can see the influence there of the mountain wave generation. Not much to see further south. A warm day in Texas, 60s and 70s. But we definitely see indications of a southern stream, possibly a subtropical jet. We'll take a quick look at a sounding here. Look at that vertical structure of the wind field. It does have some depth. It's all the way down to about 20,000. The flow weakens considerably below 20,000. There's what the 500 millibar chart looks like, and yeah, you do see that southern stream system. I think that is probably subtropical in nature. We did have a front across Texas a couple days ago, so there could be some residual polar front jet energy within that, but it's kind of hard to tell. I think the anticyclonic nature, the origin from Baja California, all of that to me kind of suggests subtropical jet activity. The main polar front jet well up to the north. Florida looking pretty nice this afternoon. Looks like a convergence line out to the east. Also pretty impressive in the Carolinas, seeing mid-70s. But it does cool down as you get into the Midwest region. These are more mountain wave clouds. That's off the Appalachians. And then in Michigan, we're getting north of the frontal boundary. This is acting kind of like an Alberta clipper, sweeping east-southeast. And of course, more cold air well up to the north, poised to move into parts of the Great Lakes. In the northeastern U.S., a slight warm-up, temperatures reaching the 50s in some areas, but there is still old snow on the ground. Connecticut, upstate New York, Poughkeepsie, up to Syracuse. And here comes clouds wandering in from the west, indicative of changes on the way. And let's summarize those changes. I love looking at these Q vectors, also this 500 millibar chart. So the main polar jet axis up in this region here, couple waves moving through the flow, one off the California coast, that other one supporting the Great Lakes system. Then over the days ahead, we're going to see that Pacific system coming into California, producing a deterioration of weather. Meanwhile, things look to be improving very gradually in the northeastern U.S. Fast-moving wave moving off the coast by tomorrow night. Then going into the end of the week, Friday night, looks kind of stormy in the southwestern U.S. Medium-scale trough there covering that part of the country with some smaller waves moving through the flow. And then the long wave pattern is suggestive of troughing in this part of the region, and this appears to be long wave ridging. Going through the rest of the weekend, we've got this wave emerging into the Central Plains, so we're going to see some chances for thunderstorms, maybe Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, and then a second wave moving through California, which will emerge in a couple days after that. And let's see that happen. This one grazes a little bit further south. Not sure if we're going to have the moisture, but we can check that out on the charts. And you can see enormous long wave ridging building on the west coast and still hanging onto that troughing out east. And this is around the 9th, so that's going to be about a week from now. Now, since we are looking at a possibility for severe weather this weekend, we need to look at where the jets are located. So let's move this up. There's that energy coming into the southwestern U.S. and starting to emerge in the plains. Now, this is pretty important because most of the stronger upper-level lift is going to be concentrated along and to the north of the jet axis. We don't tend to get very much of that to the south. And that means that the cap will tend to not change very much as you get into Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana. We could still break that, of course, but I would be looking for it to be much more difficult to erode that cap. So really, the best chart to start with is going to be the 925 millibar dew point. That's on pivotal weather in this upper air moisture menu right there. 925 millibar dew point. That gives you the moisture at about 2,500 feet or so. So it does start into Texas later tonight into tomorrow. And if we roll that forward, you can see it moving up Interstate 35 into Oklahoma by Friday. And there's that sliver of moisture coming right up through Oklahoma City, Wichita, Lincoln, and around into this low pressure area in Nebraska. So let's sample directly in that moisture. I'm going to go for Salina, Kansas. Well, not very much instability. A lot of mid-level moisture that could suppress some of the heating. Modest temperatures, almost up to 70, and the dew points at the surface, mid-50s. So that's not really that great. It's very common to see that in the early spring. The shear is great. Again, that's also very common in the spring with the very dynamic weather patterns we get. If we do get surface-based activity, some good SRH. But as we can see, the Cape could be better. But really, it doesn't take much instability. All you really need is some good heating, a pocket of higher moisture, and you're off to the races. And a quick look at the Q vectors on Friday evening. Not really any dynamics, so we may not see much going on at all. So now it's nighttime. Moisture surging north. You can see that dry slot really taking shape on Saturday afternoon in Kansas. See that right there? That's that dry slot. So the dry line should take shape on Saturday by 21Z, moving into Kansas City. Let's grab a sounding. Well, look at that right there. That's suggesting moisture erosion with strong southwesterly flow in the mid-levels. But let me take a look at 18Z, what the soundings look like. Around Falls City, Nebraska, the moisture does taper from 52 down to into the 40s with height. That's not very good at all, and still some capping and very poor lapse rates above that. And another problem is the strongly unidirectional flow, giving us this straight line hodograph. And then at max heating on Saturday, looks like the main shortwave located about right here, Kansas City, Lincoln. That means the best lift is going to be well out to the east, and we should start suppressing convection in Kansas and southern Nebraska. So in summary, this system is going to be very fast-moving and quite moisture-starved. Up to the north, yeah, we could get some weak convection. They may benefit from the strongly backed flow, but that will be very tough to chase. So I don't really know about any good targets. I might be looking more at Sunday. Look at that more beefy moisture come northward. Some cyclonic flow indicated in Oklahoma. The soundings. Let me try Wichita Falls. Yeah, I would say probably the Red River could come together for Sunday. Possibly into southern Oklahoma. Kind of an inverted trough there. I'm not a big fan of these inverted troughs. I kind of prefer the moisture axis where it impinges on these surface boundaries. So I'm thinking probably a Lawton, Wichita Falls for Sunday, and that looks better than anything that I'm seeing for Friday and Saturday. So we shall see. A lot could change between now and then. And look at that support there for very strong frontal boundary, Pacific front coming out of West Texas. Might be even more dynamic than this. Could see a little haboob there in Lubbock. Anyway, we shall see. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. Thank you for joining. I want to thank Meat Puppet for the doubled pledge. And thanks to Jason McKittrick, our new Patreon supporter. Thank you very much for your generous contribution. I hope everybody has a great Wednesday evening. We'll see you back here on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.